Hi, everyone. This is Elenbass from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to be doing some horoscopes and tarot card pulls for your solar eclipse in Libra, which is happening today, and really taking a look at how it's going to be impacting you personally. I am very excited to have my friend Raphael from Radiant Reality joining us today. If you know Raph, he is an incredible tarot reader and also an astrologer and someone I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. But it's actually been a couple of years since we've collaborated together, so it's really going to be fun to have him back, and we'll combine our superpowers and hopefully give you all some good things to think about on this solar eclipse day today. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections. If you have a story to share about the eclipse energy, use the hashtag grabbed and then tell us the transit, solar eclipse in Libra, if that's it, and then tell us your story. If you want, you can email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Trying to gather some stories up for a storytelling episode, maybe in the next month or so. So your stories are much appreciated. As always, transcripts of any of my daily talks can be found on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Couple of promotions before we get into our content for the day. The first is the live event in October. Go to Live Talks. You will see that our next talk, The Myth of Astrological Compatibility, my monthly webinar series, will be taking place on October 17th. This is a talk about what I think does and doesn't work when it comes to astrological compatibility techniques. So looking at how we know if we're a match with someone else using astrology. I've had a lot of opportunity over the years to see things that really work and things that really don't. So hopefully this will be kind of fun and interesting, give you some new tools to work with. Go to the courses page. If you're brand new to astrology, we have a new beginner's course that's pre-recorded for about 8 to 10 hours worth of an introduction to astrology if you're brand new and looking to get your bearings. But the big course is our first year program in ancient Hellenistic astrology, which begins November 16th. If you stick around after today's program is over, when Raph and I sign off, there is an informational video so you can learn more about the program if you're interested in joining. At the bottom, you will find that we have a pre-registration sale running until October 15th. So you still have a couple of weeks to use these rates to save on the cost of the course. And as always, with all of our programs, there's also need-based tuition assistance. So if you're someone who'd like to take the program, but you need a little bit of help to make it happen, use that tuition assistance option, apply for that aid, and we'll give you a range that you can pick within to match your budget for your monthly tuition. And we do that to make sure that people who are on a limited or fixed income can still study astrology if they want to. We try to make sure that studying astrology is accessible. And so that option is there. And we kind of have a pretty broad range of prices that we can help you work within to match your budget and your specific situation. So use that application button, tell us your situation, and we'll try to set you up with something that works. All right. On that note, it is solar eclipse day today, and I am really excited to have my friend Raphael here from Radiant Reality, which is his YouTube channel, and he is a fantastic tarot reader as well as an astrologer. Raph, hey, good to see you.
Hey, Adam, thanks so much for having me. Hello to all the nightlighters out there. If you are listening, I also want to say I have taken year 1 and 2 of your courses, and I really do genuinely believe they made me a better tarot reader. So if you're hovering over the book button, do it. It will be really well worth it.
Oh, man, thank you. That's so much appreciated. And, you know, it's been a couple of years since we've collaborated and done some horoscopes together. I miss it. We reconnected recently talking through some emails and was like, you know what, it's time to collaborate. And like, what better time to do it than an eclipse, right? Because it's just a charged moment that everyone has a lot of interest in.
Yeah, absolutely. And so much going on with this eclipse season, right? Especially after we just had the one in Pisces and now we've got this one in Libra. It's like a really jumbled, jangled, but sort of almost hopeful energy as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a look at the eclipse really quick before we do some horoscopes for everybody today. I think the thing that stands out to me is we've got this South Node eclipse in Libra, which can symbolize things from the past culminating or crystallized insights, the culmination of old patterns, the release of old karma. But it also does feel with a new moon solar eclipse like we're turning over we're turning the page and maybe starting a new chapter as insights and old karma is being released or insights are being crystallized. So it feels a little bit like that. This is, you know, one of our last eclipses before the nodes change signs. So there's been a lot of emphasis on Libra and the insights in relationships that have been forming and things like that. The other thing that stands out to me, Raf, is that we have the ruler of the eclipse, Venus, in Scorpio, which is a pretty spicy place.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, kind of taking us into some deep spaces. And Venus is in the process of creating something of a grand water trine. So it's just like a really, you know, you look at a Libra eclipse and you think, oh, it's airy, you know, but then so much water actually behind the surface. So I'm thinking about the kind of deeper and more emotionally charged and vulnerable spaces within relationships as something of a highlight. But what stands out to you when you look at all of this?
Absolutely. It's that water trine, right? And I'm so glad that you mentioned it. And the reason I feel like this is important is because even though Venus is obviously in the sign of her fall, right? She's not in great shape here, but that really like nice grand water trine, I feel like it's giving us a really powerful internal emotional strength because Saturn's involved. And yes, okay, Mars and Venus are both in sort of icky kind of places for what they like to be. But I almost feel like Venus is saying, okay, you know what? I'm not really where I want to be, but I'm going to support you, Mars. And then you've got Saturn saying, you know what? I'll support both of you with an ethereal kind of mystical twist so that you've got what you need to interpret this energy of the eclipse and take it forward.
I love that. Yeah, it's like what we are looking at 3 planets that are all configured by trines, which is a very helpful, flowing, beneficial kind of connection. And some of those planets look difficult, but then, you know, they're all sort of helping each other. So I love the way you put that, that there's a kind of strength available, an emotional, like it's almost like finding emotional fortitude and not being scared of going deep and of opening ourselves to more vulnerable things and for the sake of healing and for the sake of growth.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Well, we have covered this through our horoscopes of the month that I usually do and through our overview of the month. So everyone has heard me and some of my other folk on the Nightlight channel talk about this at length already. What I want to do today is really showcase your gifts as a tarot reader. I'm going to say a little bit again about each sign as we go, and then I want to allow Raf to pull some cards for each of the 12 signs. We're going to do this Aries through Pisces, which is kind of standard. And then as we go, I'll say a few initial things about the whole sign placement of the eclipse in Libra, and maybe whatever else comes to my mind. I'll keep it really brief, and then I'm going to really let Raf riff on his tarot pull for that whole sign. Remember, you can listen to this for your rising sign. We recommend that as whole sign house traditional astrologers because that's going to align with the actual transit positions in your birth chart. But if you like listening to your sun sign or your moon sign, that's also okay, obviously. Just listen to whatever sign you would normally listen to. You ready to go, Raf?
Yeah, before we start, I'd just like to bless my cards. I do it for every reading that I ever do. Before we start, as always, I would like to bless my decks of cards with all forms of love, light, peace, prosperity, and abundance. And I pray that the messages that come through are ultimately clear and concise, and they help everyone on their paths to their highest vibrational good.
Beautiful. Love that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in with Aries. The first thing that comes to my mind is this is falling one of a number of eclipses that Aries has received in the 7th house, which is the place of love and relationships. With the ruler Venus in the 8th, it makes me think about those deeper soul contracts and really looking at, you know, what new soul contracts are being established. And also which of those soul contracts we have with other people are being balanced somehow or cleared or cleansed or maybe even released. But a lot of shifts and changes for the Aries folks in their house of relationships. And that's I'm just going to keep it super concise for my part and then let Raf go and do your thing.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got 2 decks here. I just want you to say stop for both of them, and we're just going to pick straight from the top for each sign.
Stop.
All right, so Aries, your key card is the Chariot. And once more, please, Adam.
Stop.
All right. And then your secondary card is the Ace of Cups, right? So first of all, we see that that's a lot of water, which is interesting given that your planet is currently residing in the sign of Cancer, which is literally the energy of the Chariot, right? So the message here for you is there is tremendous strength, but it's tremendous strength of heart. This is about you being really honest and clear about your feelings, about what you desire out of this, and following that heart space or that emotional energy as it pulls you forward. And interestingly enough, the Ace of Cups is what I would consider like it's like a wish fulfilled, but it's a wish fulfilled when you really are letting the heart space lead. And in all of this, there is a victory and a success to come that really requires a direct route.
Nice. Let me while you're talking, I'm going to keep this chart off and then I'll pull it back up, when we go on to the next sign. That's really nice. I love that idea of leading from the heart. And yeah, just with Mars in Cancer, sometimes we think of Mars in Cancer as like weak-willed, or we always say we have like mostly like difficult things to say about it. But if you're an Aries rising and this is your ruling planet right now, I love that idea of it representing emotional courage or emotional fortitude, heart power, being vulnerable to the direction of your heart or something like that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, for some reason the sound literally just cut out.
That's okay. I was just riffing off from what you said. No big deal. Are you ready to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right on. So we'll go on to Taurus rising next. And I'm looking at Taurus rising and we see this solar eclipse in the 6th house. To me, one of the things that's really wonderful about the 6th house is that anything that we want to accomplish in life usually requires that we work or study hard. It's like if you want to be an astrologer or a tarot reader, got to read a lot, learn a lot about the symbols of the cards, learn how they interact. And there's just a tremendous amount of sacrifice that's put into most good things that we do with our life. The best things require hard work, effort, determination, and a sense of service and sacrifice for something bigger that we're trying to build. I love for Taurus risings the idea that this is the beginning of things that you're trying to build. And also maybe that you're looking with an eye toward things you've built in the past that are informing what you're going to build in the future. Like this has or hasn't worked. I tried to build this or that in the past and it had this kind of outcome. I'm taking that insight and reflection and utilizing it to build something new going forward. For example, in my own chart, I think it's fascinating that we're about to post 2 new job positions at Nightlight right after this eclipse. The 6th house for a business could be the place of people that you employ or hire. So we're building new things and we're going to be hiring new people. So as a Taurus rising, that's an easy example from my own life that I can pull on. But what are we building? What's worth our sacrifice and effort and determination? And also, what are we trying to build within our relationships with the ruler in the 7th house? That comes to my mind for Tauruses.
Yeah, wow. That's really, really interesting, especially because you're being opposed by your ruler, right? When you look at it in that way. So your first card is the Judgment card. So this is really that you are on the precipice of grand change. What really, really just blows my mind is when you said, like, I might have tried to do this before, but it's coming up again in a different way. The Judgment card is the card that I call the blast from the past. And this card always shows up when there's something from our past, from our deep past usually, that we need to assimilate into the now in order to ride the wave of change that's showing up. And then your secondary card was literally the 10 of Swords, right? So one of the ways that this can show up, the 10 of Swords is one of those cards that really freaks people out because it looks quite ominous and it can represent endings. But what this says is that there is literally the end of a great era in your life that's taking place now. And since the 6th house represents like a place of drudgery and hard work and challenge, this actually feels like an eclipse that gives you the chance to graduate. This is where you can actually look forward and say, like, yeah, you know what? I did that and it was hard. It was a bloody hard slog. But what I got from it is now solid and I'm looking out at a brand new vista.
I love that. That's nice. Very hopeful way of looking at the culmination of 6th house eclipses. Really, that's great. Yeah, I love that. As a Taurus rising, I'm especially happy for that positive look at it.
Yeah, and I mean, with the cards, they can be really scary. Like, you know, the Ten of Swords, there's no getting around. It is an ending, a completion, and a culmination. And given that this is like a South Node eclipse, there is a completion here, but not all endings have to be scary or dark, right? Sometimes it's a release to say, yeah, okay, that was that, but I'm ready for what else comes next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here we have Gemini on the ascendant, and we're looking for Geminis now at a solar eclipse in the 5th house, a place that's associated with creativity as well as that general sense of life happiness. Like, do we feel joy, creative fulfillment? Do we feel a level of happiness? This house was called the joy of Venus and the place of good fortune. Indian astrologers call it the joy derived from Dharma, which means something of the, if we are fulfilling the function that we've been born to fulfill, there should be a sense in which we feel creatively fulfilled, not just that we're doing something we ought to do, but that we're doing something that fills us with a kind of happiness. So a lot of us, you know, we're doing work on this. We're trying to make sure that it's probably not reasonable to think we should be overjoyed in every single moment of every single day. That would be unrealistic. But is there a feedback that we're getting that says you're doing something that's creatively meaningful with your life, even in small parts, even in little pockets here or there? There's been a lot of reflection on this for Geminis with these Libra South Node eclipses over a couple of years. So really, the way I see this is, especially with the ruler in the 6th, there might be a look at, you know, what is the creative processes we've been in and how much work we've put into it. And do we want to keep doing the same kind of work for the same kind of creative purposes? Or are we getting enough feedback to know that we need something else to make us happy, that the creative endeavors we have in our life aren't quite doing it any longer? But there's a real, to me, overall, a kind of reflection on the alchemy creatively, you know, of our lives if you're a Gemini rising, and where you should be applying your energy, time, and focus so that there is a greater degree of creative satisfaction.
Nice, really, really nice. So the main card that you got as a Gemini rising, you got the Justice card, which is really all about commitment. This is where you're ready to sign on the dotted line and commit yourself to something, where you tie yourself to it. Interestingly enough, the Justice card is Libra, so this very much speaks to that energy for you and your sign. And look at this. The secondary card that you got is the Judgment card, which literally just showed up for Taurus. This is about being committed to releasing the past, and it's also about being committed to the new era of life that's showing up for you. The Judgment card very often shows up when you're ready to harvest something, when you're ready to really reap what comes out of it. And you know what I really like about what you said is you can't be happy and joyful in every moment, but there's enough of it to sustain you to get through what needs to be done so that you can really taste the fruit at the end. Yeah, brilliant. I think in terms of creativity, the Justice card is the commitment to seeing it through, and the Judgment card is the commitment to being able to let it go. It's kind of like when your kids are grown up, right? Or when you finish the painting, you've then got to put it out into the world and say, I've done my bit and it's enough.
Yeah. You know, I've seen connections between the 5th and the 6th also refer to that kind of process of evaluation that happens when people are saying, you know, I have to adjust my relationship with pleasure so that it is temperate. You know, like for someone who's saying, I've got to drink a little bit less, or maybe I've got to stop drinking, or I've got to be careful with spending, or because there's so much happiness and joy in the 5th house, it can also be about what Libra in the 5th can be about, like, what is the middle path here with respect to like seeking a pleasure. And that kind of came to my mind with those two cards as well. Like, could it be a balancing or kind of evaluation of like what isn't healthy for you when it comes to happiness or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the justice card. And one of the things about this is when this shows up, I get a lot of clients that are like, oh yeah, that's great. It means it's going to go in my favor. What we deem to be fair and right and just and balanced versus what the universe deems to be those things can sometimes be very different. And so it's true what you say, like when you think like, oh, well, this is joyful and it's pleasurable, it kind of reminds me of that, like too much of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, that really, I learned so much about both tarot and astrology when we like cross our languages together. So, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I love it.
I always feel like when I watch your videos, it's always like a masterclass. Like I always come back with like at least 3 or 4 things that I'm like, I have to really think about that. And it's great. I think the combination between astrology and tarot I mean, they're very closely linked in their symbolism anyway. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. One thing I will say too, by the way, for all of you, and I'm going to show you where you can follow Raf's work after we're done. But like one thing that I will just say in general is that I never see you sticking to some kind of textbook, super linear associations between cards. I mean, there's some that you will repeat, but you also have ways of making new and interesting connections to astrology with the cards, like always, which is one of my favorite features of the way your like brain works. It's just great.
Thank you. It's that Aquarius mad scientist energy going on.
Yeah. Are you Aquarius sun? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cancer on the ascendant. We'll keep moving. We could just chat all day, but here we have our solar eclipse for Cancers in the 4th house of home and family, while Mars is in Cancer in your 1st house. There's a lot on the table right now for Cancers around home and family, not all of which might be easy. There's a real feeling of a balancing and the karmic scales are being leveled and balanced in relation to your identity and in relation to your home and family, and the intersection between how you see yourself in the world and your self-worth and the things that have come from your past. It's also a time to heal and to let go and to release and to begin something of a new chapter, even if there are some challenges along the way, or it's a very vulnerable space to be in with Mars and Cancer in your 1st house. It's also about advocating for yourself emotionally and setting up the family and home space that you feel is not only balanced but safe. Those things all come to my mind. I'm kind of riffing on, like going in a number of different directions at once. But the bottom line would be just that the solar eclipse here really points to the importance of the topic of home, family, parents, ancestral karma. And it's very personal right now with Mars and Cancer in the 1st house as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think, what's really interesting when you say it's very personal, the first card out for Cancer rising is the Hermit, right? And this card is deeply personal because it's where we start to really synthesize and understand the idea that we really are alone on our journey. Not to say that we won't have friends, that we won't have a partner, that we won't have all of these things that we have as human beings. We're built to connect. But the Hermit card is kind of that reminder to say, actually, your journey is just you one alone. And Mars at the moment moving through that 1st house is really personal, right? It's showing you like, okay, there are things that need to be released or to be cut out here. And the Hermit card, I often say to people, when the Hermit shows up, the High Priestess has a message for you. And interestingly enough, the High Priestess is the moon. And obviously Cancer is ruled by the moon. So if you're a Cancer, right now, your intuition or your psyche is trying to tell you something. And that 4th house being so deep and a space that Cancer people have a real attachment to anyway, is trying to show you like you already have the answers, but you really have to trust the journey that you're on right now to reveal it to you over time. And then your secondary card is the 6 of Pentacles to say there will be help, there will be support, there will be interaction, there'll be even charitable events. And maybe some of those things that you've already put out into the world come back to you at the right moment on your journey.
Oh, fantastic. I love that. It is interesting where that idea of help and things that will come back to you, there's so much about, like with Libra, we focus a lot on relationships, but we forget that symbol of the scales and the fall equinox, which had so much to do with the idea of the harvest and reaping what's been sown. And we usually think very punitively about reaping what's been sown, but many of us will reap the blessings and benefits of things that good intentions that we've had along the way, and our best efforts that have gone into things, even if things haven't been perfect. And the idea that a Libra eclipse with the South Node can also bring in the blessings of seeds that were planted in the past. That's a really nice idea, especially in the 4th house where this is a place that can really, like, it was associated in the ancient world with gold mines, like the treasure that's like buried and it comes up.
Hidden
So
wealth underground. Yeah.
yes, yeah, totally. So
Yeah.
I love that. All right, let me put the chart back up on the screen. Let's go into Leo right now, where we have the solar eclipse in the 3rd house. And to me, what's interesting is then looking at the ruler in the 4th. And I've been developing my masterclass series for next year, and I'm doing 4 different series, one per quarter, on the houses that are all connected by trines, by whole sign trines. So
Nice. Yeah,
4,
awesome.
8, 12, all connected. In Indian astrology, those are all called houses of moksha, which means liberation from the material world. And in a broad sense, in Indian astrology, these houses are the ones in which we learn some of our deepest spiritual lessons. And I think about Libra right now, and I go, okay, well, there's a Libra eclipse in the 3rd house for Leos, which on the surface seems like a place that has to do with your environment and the people around you and siblings and your neighborhood. And I think of the fish tank example that I always give of the 3rd house, which is like, you might have your own little rock that you sleep under as a fish, but the rest of the whole tank and the ecology around you is sort of the 3rd house, the culture of it, the mind, mood, connection, and the kind of everyday space that you swim in is the 3rd house. When you see things that are shifting in a major way in that house, it's really important to look to, like the ruler in this case, to see, well, what kind of environmental shift are we dealing with here? And then when we look at Venus, Saturn, and Mars in these houses, we go, okay, this is a shift in the immediate environment that's going to be really tangible. It's like completely rearranging the furniture of the psychic space in your everyday life, because these planets in these houses are really pointing toward very, very deep spiritual learning. Home and family, that unconscious dimension of the 12th house, where Mars and Cancer, also home and family, is being addressed. And then Saturn and Pisces in the 8th, which is about things that we're both bonded to and bound to in very deep emotional ways, in those kind of soul contract spaces of the 8th house. So I look at this, and on the surface, like a 3rd house, oh, it's just like something in your everyday environment is changing. Kind of seems mundane. Not when you look at that grand water trine forming. Then all of a sudden you go, no, this is significant change in the way you think, in the way your everyday life looks, because there's some pretty deep transformations happening in these other houses.
Yeah. Oh man, this is my brain. Like, first of all, I want to say, yay! When you said Leo on the ascendant, my ascendant was like, yay, because I got a Leo ascendant. So I thought, oh wait, I'll let him talk. But there was so many things there that you said to me that just absolutely blew my mind. So the first thing is, obviously, everybody knows that I've recently moved, so new home, all of that kind of stuff comes in for sure. And the change of location, it's a completely different area to me. So I'm kind of getting all of that. But with that grand water trine that you mentioned, for me personally, my favorite trine is the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th, because it's a gnarly sort of bunch of energies, and it is very spiritual. And you know, when you said like moving around the furniture, I was like, yeah, both literally and internally as well, right? Lots of shifts. So your main card, Leo, is the Magician, right? This, I mean, first of all, this speaks to the spiritual power part of everything that Adam's just said. What I find really interesting with this card is, yeah, it can be powerful people and all of that stuff, but people forget that with the Magician card, it really is a very spiritual energy. Anybody that's known to work with energy, or, you know, I don't like the word manipulate, but you know what I mean, manipulate energy or do things with it, is known to be spiritual and or magical or mystical in some way. We know this to be the as above, so below energy. And that 3rd house is really kind of saying to you that your skill set and your ability to harness your consciousness and your ideas and bring them to ground is really what's going to make all of this that much more potent for you. Your secondary card then is the 2 of Pentacles. Now, if you look, you've got the Mobius veil above his head, and then you've got it again here on the 2 of Pentacles. The 2 of Pentacles is very much about flow. It's very much about moving into the understanding that the material world has a spiritual element to it. And if you can utilize or again, I don't like that word, but manipulate the spiritual, intangible energies, it will give you a very tangible result, which I absolutely love. The other thing about the Two of Pentacles, it very often speaks to and around things that are to do with like budgets and getting your resources and your ducks in a row. And so when I see this, and you mentioned Saturn in the 8th, I've got so many stories about how I have seen the karmic debts that I owe be repaid, and the ones that I didn't even realize were to be repaid to me. And so for you Leos, yeah, it might seem, as Adam says, like a mundane eclipse, but it's anything but.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea that the magician, I'm almost seeing the magician there in relation to that third house where it's like, I'm going to move or manipulate things in the local environment. But I'm doing so as new resources are flowing in and debts are being paid, and like there's a lot of things moving around, and if I can work with them, some real magic could happen. But if I see those flowing the flowing watery things coming in as something that's thwarting my will, then I'm going to lose the creative power the magician has if I see it as purely thwarting me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in flow with it. You're moving with it rather than in control of it. And I think when you kind of insert yourself into the process rather than getting sort of thrown about by it, it takes on a magical experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep rolling, and we'll go into Virgo rising next, where we have the solar eclipse in Libra in the second house, a place of resources. Ancient astrologers really looked at this house as in the process of rising into the first house developmentally. Because the first house is the native, this is everything that comes to the native, or that the native will somehow acquire, or that they will develop, which could be skills, it could be self-esteem that you develop or cultivate, it could be money, but also anything that aids or acts as an asset, which can also be people, which is why in Indian astrology, you'll often see this as the education provided to you by your family that helps you develop your innate skills and abilities, or you'll even see sometimes family members that act as direct assets or helpers to the native's development. It's like there's so many ways to think about what an asset is. An eclipse in this house is therefore very broad, and in what it could mean in terms of the kinds of assets that are being developed or cultivated that you're going to start to develop, which could have anything to do with business or internal skills, but also the people that you rely or depend upon that are like valuable people in your life. And then I think also it's about what resources are we looking at and evaluating and saying, you know what, I actually don't need this. I thought that I needed this to be okay, but maybe I don't. Maybe I'm okay without something. So all of that kind of discerning around resources and acquisitions and money and things like that come to my mind here, for Virgos. And so, to me, it's also interesting that behind the scenes in all of the very social houses, 3, 7, and 11, we have this water trine forming where, part of the evaluation of resources is connected to the emotional dynamics in our relationships, and all kinds. The 3rd, 11th, and 7th present us with all manner of relationships. So the looking at resources and assets and the emotional realities that are coming to the surface in relationships are somehow connected for Virgos.
Yeah, nice, really nice. Do you know what really strikes me as well is the first 3 houses are indicated for Virgo. So it's like first house, second house, third house, because of the way that it falls. Okay, so your first card was the Hanged Man. And what really feels relevant to say to you here is because Mercury, your ruler, is in the second house as a part of this eclipse. The Hanged Man is kind of saying to you, if you sit still long enough to listen to those around you, you'll start to understand how you can be the resource for yourself as well. And then you've got the 8 of Cups as the secondary card. And this is really, in a lot of ways, I feel like this is kind of saying to you, you know what has kind of served its purpose now. And if you're willing to create space internally to break the yoke or to, remove the umbilical cord in a sense, the growth that you get from it and the push that you have forward will be incredible. The other thing with the Eight of Cups, this is another one that sort of tends to scare people. But I often say to them, it can show you where the emotional imbalance needs to be righted. And I really feel like if you feel in at the moment as a Virgo ascendant that something is missing, it's like those around you come forward to say, well, actually, there's nothing missing. It's just that you need to pour you into that hole that you feel like you have.
Nice. That is really nice. It almost, to me, the Eight of Cups in that context almost seems to draw Saturn and Neptune and Pisces in a little bit.
Yeah, that's that. Interestingly enough, the Hangman is Neptune, right? So there's definitely a spiritual context or connotation to the whole thing as well.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, Virgos, I hope you found that useful. That was really interesting for me to hear you talk about those two cards in combination. One of the things I love most about the times where I've tuned into your channel over the years, which I try to do somewhat regularly, is like it's the way that you also have such a smooth ability to combine card meanings together, which to me is one of the signs of someone who's just been at it a long time. Is like, wow, look at the fluidity with which you can talk about contrasting images and cards and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just always inspiring.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, do you know what? I'm slowly but surely developing a class around that because it's something that a lot of people have asked about. So when it goes up and out there, I'll definitely let you guys know.
Yeah, please do, because maybe we could have you on and give people some sense of how to connect with that. And again, and in the meantime, I'm going to tell people how to subscribe to your channel at the end, because I'm sure you'll be mentioning it on your channel as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Libra, obviously this is in your first house. Eclipses in our first house will give us the opportunity to change fundamental patterns with respect to our body, our health, our psychology, our behavior, the perceptions that shape how we interact with the world, that are so rooted in how we think about ourselves. And I also feel like one of the things that is it's a very simple definition of dharma in Indian philosophy is that for which you were born, that purpose for which you were born. For example, and there might be multiple purposes for which you were born. For example, a cow is born on some level to give milk. It's like one of its functions. It's what it does. And a cow, this is coming from obviously from Indian culture, where cows are revered, right? So another one might be that one of the functions of a mother, if your dharma is to be a mother for a significant portion of your life, and that's a significant part of how you identify in your life, right? I'm a mom or something like that, then your function is to mother, right? So not that you could be a mom and have other dharmas too, but the point is that when we think about dharma, we're really thinking in the first house, because that's where Indian astrologers associated the concept of dharma. We're thinking of those purposes for which I was born. And when I give from those purposes, I serve the world, and I serve myself, because there's fulfillment within me doing what comes natural to my soul. And then there's fulfillment in terms of giving naturally to the world in some way. And so the first house eclipses have so much to do with like a calibration of, am I in my soul purpose? And am I giving something that is of worth both to me and the world? And that doesn't have to be anything grandiose, but just some calibration around that comes to my mind right now for Libras.
Yeah, that's awesome. Really awesome. So your first card is the Strength card. And this card really is all about authenticity. It's about living from the heart space and being brave and bold enough to go for it from within that space of who you are. The other thing about this as well, I've come to realize or come to understand over the years, the Strength card and the Fool card, they have a lot in common. The difference being is the Fool card is kind of like you know what, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. Whereas the Strength card is, I know what's on the line here, but I'm still going for it anyway. And on top of that, you've got the Seven of Swords, which is, if you know anything about tarot, this is not an easy card. If you know anything about me, you know I really hate this card. It's like my least favorite card in the deck, right? But what this says to me is, and with everything that Adam's just said as well, it's almost like you're getting an answer with this eclipse, but there's a part of you that says, no, that can't be right. That can't be true. And so it's like some part of you is almost tricking yourself to say, well, that can't be the answer, or that's not my story. When in the heart of hearts of who you are, not only do you know that it is, but you actually love that it is. Don't let the world out there convince you that the part of your story that you really love isn't worthy or valid. Right. And this is what you mentioned about like being a mum and stuff is so important. And I think nowadays it's like, well, if somebody says like, you know, I just want to be a mum, like everybody jumps on them to say like, well, you can be so much more and you should have a career. And da-da-da. If that's what you want in your heart of hearts and it feels good to you, don't let the world lie to you and then make that turn internal where you lie to yourself and say, well, maybe I'm supposed to be more than that.
Yeah.
When what you are is perfectly enough.
Oh, I love that. You know, it's interesting because my wife is a Cancer rising with a bunch of planets in Aries in the 10th house. And when it came time to become a mother, she had this just internal crisis because she felt like I'm supposed to be more than a mom. Everyone will think less of me if I just want to take some time off from working and just be a mom, because that's really what my heart. So, and obviously the opposite can be true. Sometimes I've met with obviously lots of women, primarily my client practice over the years has been mostly women. And a lot of women too, who will feel utterly guilty about not wanting to be a mom. So at the end of the day, it really is just about what is actually authentic, right?
Yes. Right. And in your heart of hearts, what do you want? And letting that be okay. Because sometimes that answer that comes to us is really simple. And I think nowadays we're kind of programmed, right, to say, well, no, that answer's too simple. It should be more complicated than that.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have to be.
Great call. Scorpio rising, your solar eclipse is in the 12th house. This is a place of, it is the proverbial blind spot or the unconscious place. It's also a place that we retreat for the sake of solitude and separation or distance from the world in order to get away from even ourselves sometimes, right? Like in the life that we're living, sometimes we all need a yoga retreat, or we need to take an hour of silence. And so the call right now to go inward, or to, you know, kind of take a hike up the mountain to the hermitage, or to look at and really allow for things that need to be expressed from an unconscious place, which isn't always easy and can be a little scary. But most of the time when we look at it without fear, it reminds me of Empire Strikes Back in the Star Wars series. He's like, you know, you don't need your weapons when you go into that cave of darkness. Like, don't bring them with. And he doesn't trust Yoda. And so Luke Skywalker goes into the cave with his weapons. And of course, what he faces and his fears turns into a major conflict in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
And afterward, he realizes that wouldn't have been a conflict if I wouldn't have brought my fear with me and my weapons. It's almost like the Libran eclipse for Scorpios who are just guardians by nature. This is almost like let your guard down in order to allow for a peaceful understanding of unconscious material. Don't let your guard down in an unhealthy way, right? But allow for some kind of trusting, harmonious experience of the unconscious to reveal itself to you right now, that things can be easier and more harmonious than you may think that they are. That's something that comes to my mind, maybe a kind of specific take, but otherwise just a general encounter with that 12th house, which could take us into a need for quiet or retreat, or also an exploration of unconscious material in general.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really, really apt. I've got a few Scorpios, including one in my family. And what you said there really, really strikes me, because I think to myself, you know what, you could be, when you said like Scorpios are guardians in some regard, I definitely get that. And I kind of feel like now they're having that role reversal where they need a guide. And they're being given that, like, you know what, if you drop your guard, someone or something will come through to show you the path where you've shown it to so many previously. And this fits incredibly. So your main card was the Temperance card. So there's the healing that Adam was talking about on a really deep spiritual level. And what's funny about this is the secondary card is the Hierophant. What I call Temperance is the Hierophant set free. right? The Hierophant is where we do the practices and the rituals and the routines and the dedication to reach the spirituality. But when we can chuck all the dogma away, what we're left with is the pure essence of spirituality and the transcendence that comes from it. And so really and truthfully, Scorpio, you've done the work, you've been the guide that Adam was talking about, and now it's time for you to trust that that step is going to be revealed to you, and the right person comes in to say, you've done enough, I've got it from here.
Right. I love that. Yeah. I also, those two cards bring to my mind the idea of, when I think of the Hierophant, sometimes I think of the people in front of the Hierophant, of seeking the, almost like the way you would pray to a saint or to a god or goddess for intervention, like almost like petitionary prayer or something, like, dear gods, please help me with this thing. And and that has a place, but then also this idea of somehow the gnosis that flows directly through us, that can be channeled creatively, that allows us to see, you can petition on, you can look at the hierarchies of gods and goddesses and petition them and get their help. And then there's also going to be times where that divine creative power just flows directly through you. And being able to utilize that energy within yourself is just as important as, taking the approach that someone higher than myself has this, because both can be true at different times. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. This is the process of initiation. This is the process of understanding the knowledge and the secrets or the gnosis once you've been initiated. Right?
Yes.
This is where you walk in it, the Hierophant set free, right? That's when you can drop all of that and say, okay, you know what? I've got it now. I
love that.
From here.
I love that. It's funny because that's so it's like I was just kind of going somewhere intuitively with the way you were talking about those cards and making that connection. So the fact that when you reiterate it like that, I'm like, okay, yes, that's
awesome. Awesome.
Tapping into something there. That's cool. Okay, so here we have Sagittarius on the ascendant, and we're looking at the solar eclipse in your 11th house. This house was traditionally called the place of allies and wishes and aspirations and of hope, as well as anyone or anything that acts as an ally in the development of our ambitions and our hopes. So this house is called the house of good spirit and the joy of Jupiter. With Jupiter also in your 7th house, which is a place of relationships and social connections, as well as things like love and marriage. I like for Sagittarius right now, I like the idea that there is a shift in the landscape of your relationships taking place, and that new or important allies, groups, and people are coming that have, whether it be they have wisdom or they have understanding or they have beneficial resources of any kind to offer you, that there's new doors that are going to be opening for you socially. Maybe also as you're doing some work to process, what hasn't worked in other groups or with other friends or allies or connections in the past. I like that your mind may be open to different kinds of people right now, especially with Jupiter and Gemini in your 7th house.
Nice, really nice. So, I mean, that fits perfectly actually, because your main card is the High Priestess, which is hidden things revealed, secrets coming to light, all of that kind of stuff. But it's also your own intuitive faculty. And then your secondary card was the Six of Swords. And so what this really says to me is, where you are going and traveling, you can't talk about it just yet. Maybe because you don't have the language. And so the people that you're connecting with that Adam's talking about, they may be the people that come through and give you the language that you need. They may be the people that fill in the gaps or give you the different puzzle pieces. And truthfully speaking, there are times in life where the goals and the desires that we have or that we're heading towards, we're not meant to talk about them. There's been few times in my life where I've had an idea or something's popped up and I get that little tap on my head to say, listen, keep your mouth shut. Now is not the time to, right? Like, yeah, because I'll talk about everything to everyone. And there are times where it's almost like the universe or God or whatever you want to call it says to you, this isn't about that. You need to stay focused and you need to do this. You don't need that. The right people will show up. They'll give you the pieces of the puzzle that you need as you're making that journey.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, there's something here about the with, especially with the eclipse ruler being Venus in the 12th, right? That is also it's like, I feel like that patience and that discernment is key, because it's easy to be sort of seduced by Venus in the 12th into, if you're just a little bit more patient and you just wait and let things develop a little bit more organically, let them gestate a little bit longer, you'll see things much more clearly. Like for all of my Sages right now, I would almost say any decisions you're faced with, especially in relationships, almost like wait a couple more weeks until Venus enters Sag in your first house. You'll be so much clearer.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, especially because the Six of Swords is going from rough waters to smooth.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's keep jamming. Let's go into Capricorn rising. We have your solar eclipse happening in the 10th house. Of course, this is the quintessential place of work and career and profession, reputation, as well as things like achievements and recognition and public reputation, broadly speaking. So here with South Node eclipses, you might be reaching the end of a season in your life with respect to your work or the work environment, the kinds of things that you have done or been passionate about, the people you work with, the structures or environment of the workplace. And it is as though there's a new chapter that's getting started, but it's also happening as there's this kind of critical evaluation process taking place. And that's reflected by both the sign of Libra and the South Node eclipse. I'm going to leave it there, and let's see where the cards take us.
All right, so you got the Hierophant as your main card, which is interesting because, you know, structures, rules, regulations, and hierarchies. And then as your other card, you got the Temperance card. So literally like the other way around for what Scorpio got. I find this interesting because a lot of the messages would be similar, but the message outside of this is also to remember that the process of you putting yourself out into the world on that wider world stage is also a process of initiation. There comes a point where you got to say, you know what, I've learned enough, I've done enough, and now it's time to just present what I know. Now it's time to kind of let it unfold, as it were. And also trust yourself enough to speak on things that you know you're well versed in.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. There, with Venus in the 11th in Capricorn's chart as the ruler of the eclipse in Scorpio, it's like not everyone may love what you have to say or where you're going, but that doesn't make it untrue, and it doesn't make it lacking in any value.
Yeah. I like that. I like that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to pull up the chart again, and let's roll on to Aquarius. So with Aquarius rising, the solar eclipse is taking place in your 9th house, which is the place of our higher wisdom, learning in terms of the pursuit of truth and spirituality, philosophy. This is the place of the law and the courts, but it's also the place that was talked about as the place where the manifestation of the gods and signs and dreams and oracles could be found. So it really is a place where we are in communication with source or higher truth. And, you know, even people, let's say, who have no interest in astrology but are interested in physics will often have like a packed 9th house, because we're ultimately all seeking truth on one level or another. So for Aquarians right now, I see this as a shift, a potential turning point with respect to your outlook on life and your philosophy. And also with respect to looking at the social ramifications of your beliefs. Because Libra in the 9th with the Venus placement in the 10th, to me suggests that the social reality of your beliefs and ideas are really coming to your mind right now. I would think of this as a moment where Aquarians might be really looking at the human level of their beliefs and outlooks, which, even though Aquarius seems like it's a sign that's all about humanity, Aquarians can just be so 20,000 feet above the earth, you know, that it's like, well, yes, it's about humanity, but it's not really about people, you know? And so I feel like this could be a time or a place where Aquarians can also maybe incorporate more important emotional, personal levels of connection between their outlooks in life and the actual day-to-day relationships that they have. That might also be my bias speaking as someone who grew up Cancer frustrated by all Aquarians in my family. I don't know. So.
Yeah, I was just listening to that thinking, I feel personally attacked right now. But no lies were told. So, what are you going to do?
Well, let's see what the cards say. Maybe they'll give us a different angle.
So we got the Emperor. And no, I think everything that you said was absolutely spot on. What's really funny is the Emperor can sometimes where we meet like a hard line in the sand, right? It's like the first authority that we meet in growing up is dad, right? What I feel like this is kind of saying is there comes a point where you do have to put a limitation on it and say, okay, I've gone as far as I can really go and done as much as I can to make all of this make sense. So the Emperor is kind of saying, find a limit. You know that everything is limitless, but find a limit so that you can start to work backward and retro-engineer this whole thing. On top of that, you've got the Queen of Wands. So aside from all of her other meanings, one of the meanings that I attribute to the Queen of Wands is really about knowing and firming up your boundaries. And so suddenly you've got this double hit to say, it's not about hemming yourself in, Aquarius. It's about putting a circle around it so that you can say, this is important now. And once I've figured out how all of this fits together, I can then incorporate something else. The other part of this on a really mundane level, this could literally be like the Queen of Wands, a fire sign woman, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, with the Emperor is Aries energy. So an Aries woman may very well help or feature in this for you figuring out, okay, this is where I need to start.
Yeah, love that. It's interesting that the 9th house was called the joy of the sun. And the sun was associated with illumination, but also in the 9th house with law. And you don't think about light and law. Oftentimes people think about like law and Saturn or something like that. But actually, like what I heard you saying is that like, once you have clarity, you have something like law, but it's not hard and rigid. Is that a good way
brilliant.
Yeah,
that's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. Yeah. And that's really the laws of light, isn't it? Everything that it touches can be seen with the eye.
Right.
But there has to be a limit. There has to be something to kind of say, okay, we've gone far enough and now we'll work backward from this and then we'll push on forward again, which, as you know, Aquarians we don't like to hear.
That's funny. So last sign is Pisces, and Pisces rising features our solar eclipse in the 8th house. Now the 8th house, a place of karmic exchange. I think about Libra in the 8th house as the two actually have a lot in common, in the sense that everything in the 8th is in the process of reaching the setting place in the 7th, which, as the place where the sun sets, was called the place of resolution, where everything that begins has an ending. It enters the metaphorical underworld in the 7th house. So everything in the 8th moving toward the 7th was said to be in the process of receiving some kind of karmic balance. So it's like everything where there's a karmic balance that eventually will occur, something that will come to you through death as an inheritance, or eventuality of death itself, as well as the things we try to avoid having to reconcile ourselves with, the problems we try to hide from. And so that's a little ominous. But on the other hand, all relationships that are rooted in reciprocal care for one another have blessings and benefits that come out of this house. So this is it's a really actually diverse house. It's not as scary as most of us, I think. It's like one of the cards you were mentioning that people get scared by, you know, this is not as scary as we think it is. It can be, especially if we're trying to avoid things. There are bills that come due in life, but this house suggests to me for Pisces, bills that are coming due, but also blessings, the leveling of the checkbook. It's the balancing of the checkbook. And it's what kinds of relationships, if you just got out of debt, most people will be like, okay, well, I'm not using my credit cards in the same way. You know,
Mhm.
there's an insightfulness and a reflectiveness on what has worked and what hasn't worked that you can bring forward right now as you are reaching maybe the end of certain karmic cycles.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So you've got the Lovers card as your main energy. And, you know, when we boil it down, yes, it can be about love and relationship and partnership. But truthfully speaking, the Lovers card is about choice. And your secondary card is the Four of Pentacles. And with what you were saying there about, like, what I feel this is saying is you can choose to be debt free, or you can choose to be bound by your circumstances. The choice really is yours. And with a South Node eclipse in the 8th house, it really does need to be a choice of whether you're going to transcend your current material experience, but also whether you're going to speak on and see the higher value of the wisdom that you've learned. And it's funny because when you talk about that, the Venus in the Scorpio energy, it's almost like Venus in the 9th house is then saying, have you learned this yet?
Mm.
You know, have you taken this? Are you going to assimilate it yet? And in terms of partnerships and connections and interactions with people, whether they're personal, professional, or platonic, there's something in this to say, are the relationships that you have a foundation, or are they literally holding you captive or rigid?
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a strong reading for Pisces. I feel like that one really popped.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, just to everybody out there, from both of us, we hope that you have a beautiful eclipse experience, and that remember that eclipses take long time to play out. Give it the next 3, 4, 5 months to really see that. Looking at that whole sign. We've given you several different episodes this week that are hopefully useful in navigating the eclipse energy. I want to tell you how you can follow Raphael. So let me just pull up. I want to show you his YouTube, first of all,
Oh, wow.
which I
Thank you.
highly recommend. This is Reydiant Reality on YouTube, and you can find that he has weekly tarot and lots of really amazing content. So I couldn't more highly recommend becoming a subscriber on his channel and following his regular tarot work. You know, Raphael came through Nightlight and is a great astrologer and has, you know, a lot, I think, in common with my own spiritual outlook on life. So that's why I just love collaborating with him. And then radiantreality.com is the website. And here you can see his services, his courses, his shop. You can book a reading. And I also couldn't recommend that more highly. You are in the hands of a very sensitive and soul-centered reader in Raphael. So it's just a real pleasure and privilege to have you here on the channel today, helping us delineate the solar eclipse. And, you know, as always, I'm just really glad to know you.
Likewise, man. I'm absolutely blown away. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And as I said, I took year 1 and year 2, and they really did just elevate my understanding of astrology and definitely made me a better tarot reader. So if you're thinking about doing it, I would say absolutely go for it. I love working with you. I always learn something new, and it's always a laugh as well.
Yeah, for sure. I am hoping that we can do this again soon. Like I said, check Raphael out on all of his channels and stuff like that. If you want to stick around after I sign off, there is an informational video about our year 1 program that is coming up on November 16th. Our pre-registration sale lasts until October 15th. So if you want to learn more about what our year 1 program is like, stick around after we sign off. You can learn more about it. And if you have any questions about anything you find on our website, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Raph, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all again next time. Bye, everyone.
Take care, man. Thanks so much.